Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Yourself?
I have a problem.
Okay.
Uh, so I have to make a method which returns an integer that the user inputs,
So you want the user to type in an integer,
and then I want to print it back out again.
and you have to use a method.
And I have to return it. What is that supposed to mean?
Okay, now let's get started with the program. So first, how do we get input from the user? We can use something called scanner.
Yeah.
The first step is to import it. So we have to write the import statement. Import java.util.scanner. And then we have to make a method. So what do you want to call the first method?
Let's just call it returnint.
Let's call it getInput.
Okay.
Because what it's doing is it gets the input. So first it's public, so that it can be read by the other classes. Static, or I'll just always write this. And then int, because it's returning the integer that the user inputted. And now we can call it getInput.
So it's not void this time, it's int.
But it's not taking anything in. So we can just leave these brackets empty.
Wait, but isn't it taking in the integer that the user enters?
No, that's what it's returning.
Okay.
So the input is nothing, it just gets called, but the output is what the user entered.
Okay.
So our first step is to declare the scanner. So we have scanner sc would be a new scanner. Or you know what, we can just put it outside and make it a global variable.
So what's a global variable?
A global variable means that it's a variable that can be read by all the methods in a program.
So you don't need to keep initializing, and
No.
you can just use it stays.
That means I don't have to put it into the brackets and have this method use it. It's global. It can be used by anyone. Its value can be changed. It can even be used by other classes. However, this means that it must be public. And then of course static, so that it can be called by the main method. Public static scanner sc, that's a nice name, equals new scanner, and the syntax would be system.in. Just remember this part. So
Okay.
now we have to tell the user to print a number, right?
Yeah.
So now we have to get an integer.
Right.
So the scanner conveniently has a method where it obtains an integer, where it parses it on the spot. So for example, we could have int n equals sc, which is our scanner, dot next int. Next int means that is going to take the next integer that is going to be inputted by the user, and it automatically becomes an integer.
Okay.
However, if the user inputs anything that's not an integer, the program will crash and throw an exception. So now that we have n, we can return n, the integer. So we have the program, we have int, let's have number, equals get input. And now let's print it. And then add plus number to display the variable. Now let's see what happens.
Okay. So let's run this.
Enter a number. 5. Your number
Wow.
is 5. Magic. And we use the magic of methods. So basically, we managed to ask the user to enter a number all in one line because of getInput. And this method getInput, it's invisible. Almost.
I see.
I mean, it could even be on another file. So, you're done.
Well, you see, that's the problem. There's a tiny bit more to the program. You also have to check if the number is a perfect square or not and return a Boolean value.
And you really couldn't have told me this earlier?
Kind of forgot.
This is your homework, you know.
Well, I have a problem.
Okay, so now we have to find out if the number is a perfect square, right?
Yeah.
So let's make a method for that. Now, so it means that it has to return true or false, right?
Yes.
I mean, is it the number a perfect square? True or
Yeah.
false? So it would be public, static,
And Boolean this time.
yes, because that is what it is returning. Perfect square. And this time it's actually taking in a number. It's taking in the number which we want to know if it's a perfect square or not. So int n. So now, how do we know if a number is a perfect square?
Well, if it's, it can be evenly rooted out. So, if we could do a for loop that goes through all the numbers,
Or for loop? I'm not sure that's gonna work.
why not?
Because it makes no sense. Now, first what we have to do is to get the actual square root, which would be returned as a double, and then compare it to the integral value.
Okay.
So we could have double D equals math dot square root n. Now this will return us a very long decimal. Now, if we have...
That's assuming it's not a perfect square.
That's assuming it's not a perfect square. If it is a perfect square, like 16,
Then it'll be nice, 0.0.
exactly. But now, if we have int I equals math dot square root n, this will also be a nice number. Why? Because it will automatically be casted to the lowest integer. But why is it red?
Well, will it automatically cast it?
No. The problem here, you see, is that it returns a double.
Oh, so we have to manually cast it.
So remember, whenever you have math dot square root and you want to get the integer, put in I. However, this will not round it to the nearest integer. This will simply chop off the decimal. So if you have 5.9, it will become 5. If you have 6.98, it becomes 6. Just to warn you.
So now we compare them.
Yeah. So note that if you're comparing a 4 to 4.0, they should be equal.
Right.
It considers them as equal. So if we say if I equals to D, return true. Else, return false. Because this means that D has decimals, which means that it's clearly not a perfect square.
Okay.
Now, show me where the for loop is.
There isn't a for loop.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, let's call the method, shall we?
Right, so where would we call it?
In the main method.
Okay.
Now, come on, show that you've learned something. How do we call it?
Well, you'd have to, you run the method perfect square on the number.
Yes.
So-
And it returns a boolean.
So then you would make a Boolean value for a
Okay.
variable, perhaps.
So we type in boolean, PS, perfect square,
Yeah.
equals,
Perfect square.
perfect square of number. So now, we can simply output the result. So we'll say number. Now, we can't just say it's true or false, right?
So what we should do is probably have an if statement that if the Boolean value is true, which is meaning it is a perfect square, it says something.
That's perfect. So basically, we should have if. So if PS, as in if it's a perfect square, then we print out number is a perfect square.
And remember, if it's just PS, it technically means that PS is true. So you don't even have to write true or not. It says PS, then if true. So we'll print out this.
Exactly. Now else would just mean that it's false. I mean, there's nothing else it can be other than true. It can be false. That's it. So else, this means that it's false, is not a perfect square.
So let's save this and run this.
Let's see. So let's try 25. 25 is a perfect square.
Of what?
Oh, now you want the result?
Oh,
Not just a Boolean?
I guess. It would be nice.
Is it on the assignment sheet?
No. Oh, what? Okay.
Okay, now we can make this a lot easier. We could just use math.square root since we already know it's a perfect square.
Yeah.
So we just get the square root and we're done.
Oh, I see.
It's a perfect square.
Let's also check our program for if it's not a perfect square, too.
The result is math.square root number.
Okay.
So when you run it, we enter 25.
No, my teacher's really gonna like me.
Exactly. Now if we enter 24,
Oh, so it works.
yeah,
Well, that's nice.
perfect. You're really gonna pass this class.
Thanks, man.
And you found the right method to do so. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for our next videos.
See you guys.